Hello and welcome back to Book Yaps with Ash. I am Ash. Haven is right here. So sorry you can't really see him, but that's where he wants to be, so he's going to be there. He doesn't care about you or me. That's not true. He cares about me. Book Yaps with Ash. Anyways, these are the books that I read in February. This is my reading wrap video. I don't know why I'm being weird about it all of a sudden. How many books did I read in February? 6? Yes. With the 6th one, I finished on March 1st, so sue me. I found out a lot of people, if they finish the book March 1st, they'll consider it a March read. I feel like if I read 90% of the book in February and 10% in March, then it's a February book. Isn't that just how, math works? So anyways, that book's a February book for me. I'm going to do it my way. But anyways, let's get into the 6 books that I read in February. Okay, first one here is Moon of the Crusted Snow. This is kind of a dystopian, apocalyptic novel, but it is set on an indigenous reserve in northern Ontario, and it takes a very interesting and realistic perspective about how an indigenous community could experience kind of a world-ending situation because of the uniqueness of being already so disconnected from, the colonizer's society, essentially. So, basically, we are following a community that lives up in this northern Ontario reserve, and they have only just kind of started getting used to, these technologies that the cities of Canada have developed. So, phone lines and electricity and all that stuff, because they didn't used to have it until in recent years. So a lot of the main characters that we're following, they didn't grow up with these kinds of things. They didn't rely on the Canadian government or anything like that to supply them with electricity or phones or TV or anything like that. And they're used to sometimes phone lines going down, that sort of thing. And it happens one day and it just doesn't come back. And they don't know what's going on. They don't really have communication with the rest of the province or anything like that. And it's how they basically deal with the situation and prep for whatever is to come next. I really like the concept. I think it's interesting and, like I said, very realistic. I found this book to just be kind of okay. I feel like I was looking for more from it and waiting for more from it. The writing itself was okay. The characters themselves were okay. The plot was okay. It was all just generally okay for me. I think I just wanted more. Minor spoiler I get, but midway through the book, there's a character that's introduced that kind of, he's a white man and it feels like he's going to be kind of like the villain, and he is, but I wanted more tension out of that. I feel like a lot of people describe this book as really tense and claustrophobic, and it is, but not, as much as I expected it to be. So, yeah, I rated this one a 3-star. It was okay. The next book I read was The Long Game, so the last Game Changers book that we have so far. I did a whole video talking about the Game Changers series, and I won't spoil anything for anyone who is considering reading this series, but I recommend, of course, if you love Shane and Elia, I still recommend reading the whole series from start to finish in order. Yes, that means you're reading 3 books in between Heated Rivalry and The Long Game, but it will make The Long Game worth it, especially if you read Role Model, because those timelines overlap, and it's really exciting going from Role Model kind of knowing things that happen and then seeing basically Ilia's side of that experience in The Long Game. And yeah, I think it was great. I love seeing their relationship evolve, and I'm looking forward to Unrivaled whenever it is ready. Rachel, take your time, queen. We will wait. I'm gonna save my favorite for the end, so I'm skipping that one. Next one is another, ironically, 6th book in the series, and that is The Song of Susanna. It's the 6th book in the Dark Tower series, so I also won't say too much about this book because I'm not sure how I could do that without spoiling anything really, given it's a 6th book. But I will say one thing, okay? I've talked a lot about the 5th book, The Wolves of the Kala, and not liking it very much, and like not even being sure if I was going to keep going with the Dark Tower because it was so long and took me so long to finish. But I'm very glad I did. And there's one really cool thing about this book that actually kind of starts at the end of the 5th one and is like a main plot point in Song of Susanna. And I guess it might be a spoiler, but it also might convince you to read the series. I don't really feel like it's a spoiler, so I'm not going to tell you details, but if you really don't want to be spoiled at all for any Dark Tower, just skip ahead until this isn't here. Okay, so there's a character in book 5 that is from another of Stephen King's universe. That's not a shocker. We know that he loves to have Easter eggs and characters and whatever from other books. Not a surprise. But at the end of the book, you realize that Stephen King himself is actually a character in the Dark Tower world. And when we get to book 6, he has written himself in as a character. So the quartet interacts, and they're going to look for Stephen King because he plays a big part in their mission to get to the tower. And I just feel like nobody but Stephen King can do that. And it'd be cool. And it was so cool. Like, who thinks to do that and it does it so well without it being, like, weird or, like, narcissistic? I thought it was amazing. So if you're considering going on with Dark Tower, especially if you struggled with Wolves of the Kala like I did, keep going. Because Song of Susanna was great. Not a huge long side quest. A much shorter book overall. And that little part that I was just talking about is really quite cool. Really cool. I love Stephen King. I love an Easter egg. I love a little universe connection thing, even if I don't fully understand it or remember things. I love it. The next one that I want to tell you about was actually written by Stephen King's son, and maybe he doesn't want to be known as Stephen King's son, but how do you not be? And that's Joe Hill, and it was Heart-Shaped Box. This was Joe Hill's debut novel. I believe he had a short story collection before this was published. This is about a I think he's like basically a retired musician. And he's kind of a weird guy. He's very unlikable. I never liked him the entire time. So I'll just put that out there. He likes to buy weird stuff. Death-related stuff. Just because he has a lot of money, I guess. I don't know. And one day, he purchases a ghost. Someone on eBay is selling a ghost. And then you buy this person's suit, and the ghost comes with them. So that's a great concept in itself, of course, for a horror story. Very interesting. And then, of course, this ghost starts haunting him and his current girlfriend, and you start to learn why, and it's all about them trying to shake the ghost and not die, because the ghost is like, you're gonna die, and everyone around you is gonna die. I thought the concept was great. I just found this book to be incredibly mid. I had a really hard time getting into it, quite possibly because of the book I finished before I started this one, which I will talk about in a moment. But also, I don't know, I think I hated the main character. He's such a douche. He's to me, a loser. Nothing to offer. Musician, wham, poor me, I'm rich. I date younger women. I don't call them by their first names. I call them by the state they're from. And you kind of expect him to have this, like, redemption arc where, like, oh, he's not actually that bad. And maybe he had that, but I just simply didn't care because I give men the doubt of the benefit, and the bar's underground, and I think they should all start in jail, work their way out and prove that they're good people. So maybe it's a little bit harder for me to give a shit about this guy, but I don't know. I didn't really care. I was, happy to be done with it. I had a hard time picking it back up. Even, like, at the climax-ish part, I was like, how are we not done yet? Like, I don't know. Maybe that's the sign that it wasn't necessarily for me, but it was a cool concept. If you like older horror, I feel like this is from like 2008 or something, so I guess that's older. Then you might like it. If you like more modern horror, you probably will be like, meh, this is old news, which like it is, I guess. The next two are my two favorites of the month. Both of them 5 stars for me. One of them like a 6-star though. Like they were both really good in my favorites, but one is definitely my forever favorite. You know what I mean? Okay. So let's start with the regular favorite. And this is the book I finished March 1st, so absolutely sue me if you need to. But that is Tress of the Emerald Sea. This is a fantasy book by Brandon Sanderson, if you haven't heard of it. I'm not huge into fantasy, but Beth let me borrow it because she said it was really good, and she loves Brandon Sanderson, and I said I'll give it a try. If you are not super into fantasy, or you're nervous about getting into fantasy because you don't understand magic systems and language and just how fantasy can be written sometimes, this is a great book for you because there is a magic system, but it's like pretty easy to understand, and it's a pretty big part of the book, so you get a lot of it. And the writing style is very conversational. It's witty, it's whimsical, it is funny, and it's not like, medieval speak or anything like that. It's like normal. But this book follows Tress. She is from the Rock, I guess is what they call it, an island that nobody ever leaves. And she's 18 and she's in love with the king's son, who he also doesn't really want to be the king's son or be king. He's just a guy. His name's Charlie, and I'm convinced he's a bottom. But anyways, the king takes Charlie to find a wife because he can't marry Tress, who's just a window cleaner. And he doesn't want to marry any of them. He makes sure that they don't like him and sabotages the whole thing. And then he is kidnapped or taken by a sorceress for ransom. And the king comes back with some other guy and his wife. And Tress goes, well, I'm going to save Charlie. And she sneaks onto a ship and makes her way into the most dangerous parts of the planet to try and save this boy who's pretty unremarkable, if I'm honest. So basically she ends up on this ship of pirates. She doesn't intend to, but they're pirates. And you think that they might be dangerous and scary, but it ends up being this like found family situation. And that's all I'll say. But yeah, it was a great fantasy story, really cool magic system, fantastic characters, fantastic writing, very quotable, lots of like interesting observations made, and yeah, we love to see a little girly succeed. Well, like it's hard. That's kind of the whole vibe of it. So that was Tress of the Emerald Sea, and then my favorite book of the month, the year so far, one of the favorites of my life, I believe, is The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. And let me tell you a story about this book, okay? I did never intend to read this book. I heard about it, heard it was sad, heard a lot of people like Kristen Hanna, and just was like, I don't know if I'm interested. But one day I was at the bookstore and I was flipping through books as I do, and I was reading the first pages of some books just to see if I thought they'd be interesting, not intending to buy them, intending to put them on hold at the library. So I'm not spending that dough. And just out of curiosity, I picked up, The Count of Monte Cristo. I said, I don't want to read this, guys. Like, I hear everybody's having fun with it. Don't want to read it. It reminded me of Dracula, and that felt traumatic. I picked up, what else did I pick up? A debut that I hadn't heard of. There was some Canadian fiction I was reading. The first few pages of that I put on hold at the library. And then I got into the aisle with Kristen Hanna, and she had like a whole shelf to herself. And there were like 50 copies of The Nightingale. And I thought, Mark, what's the hype? What is it about? Maybe it truly is really good. So I pick it up, and instead of reading the first page, I read the first 5 pages, which was the first chapter. And I would have continued reading it, but someone who worked there came up and said, hey, you finding everything okay? And I said, yes, of course I am. I always am. And she said, this is probably my favorite book of all time. I love this book so much. And I thought, well, I have to purchase this book and read it immediately. So I did. And let me tell you something about this book, okay? I have never read anything so sad in my entire life. Probably because it's historical fiction. It's based on World War II. It's based on real events that happened, and it is feeling very familiar to events happening right now. So I was not only sad, I was pissed the fuck off reading this because we're letting it happen again. We're denying it happened in the first place, which is crazy. But I mean, the reason it felt so sad is because the characters felt so real. You care about them so much, but also because I'm a human being and like, trigger warning, but when a mother is shot and her baby rolls towards the main character because she's Jewish, if you're not an asshole, that would probably make you sad, right? So yeah, this was like one of the first books I've ever read that I had to like put down because I was so upset. I don't typically cry while reading. I usually just look up and then like reset basically. I'm not like, I can uninvest in it. So I had to do that many times because I didn't really want to cry. But I was the closest to crying that I have probably ever been when reading a book. But I also just ate it up, like read over 200 pages in one day, just could not put it down. And it's sad. Like it's sad through the whole thing. So I'll tell you that right now. Don't expect it to not be. But it's a beautiful story. And to be honest, as I'm reading this, I'm thinking, this kind of book, historical fiction that has like real events, well researched and accurate, but fictional characters, these need to be taught in schools. Like while we can read history books and be told numbers and be told facts and be shown old footage, it's harder to connect to, you know, especially for kids, and that kind of thing. But I think if we were reading historical fiction like this and like forming an attachment with, yes, a fictional character, but from a real scenario, I think it's just a great example of how reading creates so much empathy. And I think a book like this should be a curriculum piece for history or even English in schools, because I learned a lot about the war that I didn't know, obviously, or if I did know, it had escaped my brain at this point. And I think that this book will stick with me for a long time. I have not stopped thinking about it since I finished it early in the month, and I don't think I will stop thinking about it ever. So yeah, it's hard to recommend it because it's so sad. I don't know why I love it if it's so sad, but yeah, if you like a sad book every once in a while or all the time, and you haven't read The Nightingale yet, add it to your TBR and put it at the top. I'm sure if you are a sad book person, you've already read it, and I'm just preaching to the choir. So yeah, those are the 6 books I read in February. It's March now. It's gonna be 17 degrees on Saturday, and that's gonna be really good for me. So, yay. So this has been Book Yaps with Ash. I have been Ash, and thank you for watching. And don't forget to subscribe. If you're watching this and you haven't subscribed, you do it, please. Thank you. Okay, bye.